The train rolled into Dust Haven with a cry that echoed across the empty Wyoming plains. Smoke curled into the pale morning sky, drifting like a warning. Lena Hartwell pressed her gloved hand to the window as the wheels screeched against the tracks. Her heart pounded fast, full of hope and fear tangled together. After years of washing other people's clothes, cooking other people's meals, and sleeping in other people's attics, she had finally dared to believe she might have a home of her own. A letter had promised it. A kind man with steady handwriting and gentle words. A cabin near a creek. Chickens. A garden. A place where loneliness might finally loosen its hold. Lena stepped down onto the platform, boots meeting dust that curled around her ankles. She set her 2 trunks beside her and looked around for the man who had written her so faithfully. Samuel Carver, 42, widower. A man who claimed he wanted companionship more than anything else. He had described himself as quiet, dependable, and hopeful. She held to that last word tightly. But no one stood waiting. Only the whistle. Only the wind. Only the wide stretch of empty land. Her breath caught. She turned one way, then the other, scanning for a face that might match the letters. A hat. A horse. A wave. Something. Nothing came. "Ma'am?" A small voice called. Lena spun around. A boy stood on the edge of the platform, no older than 9. His bare feet were red from the cold. His shirt hung loose on his thin frame. Dust streaked across his cheeks as if he had run a long way. "Are you Miss Hartwell?" he asked, uncertain. "Yes," Lena said, trying to steady her voice. "Are you here for me?" The boy swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm Luke Carver." "Papa ain't comin'." The world went quiet, so quiet she heard the flap of a tarp somewhere down the line. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Luke's chin trembled, but he held his ground. "He died yesterday. Fever took him. We buried him ourselves." For a moment, Lena couldn't breathe. The letter in her pocket suddenly felt heavy as stone. Her fingers brushed it unconsciously, as if touching it might change the boy's words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "So sorry." Luke blinked fast. "Pa told us you were coming. He wrote the last letter from his bed. Said maybe you'd still come anyway." Lena's throat burned. She looked past Luke toward the horizon where a small ridge rose against the sky. Beyond it, she imagined a house now missing the man who had promised her a future. "How many of you are there?" she asked softly. 7, Luke said. He hesitated. "Mama died last spring. Little Rose, too. Pa tried his best, but—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Behind her, the train whistle blew. The cars lurched forward. The only road back east began to move away from her one iron wheel at a time. She looked at her trunks, at the boy's bare feet, at his thin arms holding courage far too big for his age. "Where is your home?" she asked. Luke took one of her trunks with both hands, nearly toppling under its weight. "Beyond Willow Ridge. It ain't far. We can walk." Lena picked up the other trunk. Her legs felt weak, but she followed. The road was quiet, except for the crunch of gravel and the sigh of wind moving through the wild grass. A single hawk circled overhead. The land felt too big, too empty, as if waiting for something to claim it. "You're smaller than I thought," Lena said gently. Luke didn't smile. Pa always said size don't matter. Doing does. When they reached the rise, the cabin came into view. It leaned tiredly against the earth. The porch sagged, smoke no longer rose from the chimney. A broken fence lay scattered around a patch of dirt that might once have been a garden. Inside, 6 faces froze the moment she stepped through the door. Thin shoulders, wide eyes. Fear and hope tangled in every gaze. A baby cried from a crate near the hearth, wrapped in a quilt patched so many times the seams looked like veins. A girl of about 8 stepped forward, holding a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I'm Lena," she answered quietly. "Your father sent for me." The girl's lips pressed into a thin line. "Paul's gone." "I know," Lena whispered. The children watched her with a hunger that went deeper than empty stomachs, a hunger for something solid, something safe. Her hands shook as she opened her trunk. She pulled out the small sack of rice she'd saved for her own journey, a strip of salt pork, a handful of herbs. She moved to the hearth, rolled up her sleeves, and began to cook. No one spoke. When she placed bowls in their hands, they ate slowly, eyes darting to her as if afraid she might disappear like the others they had lost. Luke sat beside her at last. His voice cracked. "Are you leaving after today?" Lena looked at the children gathered close. At the cold hearth, the cracked walls, the empty chair that would never be filled again. "No," she said softly. "I'm not leaving." Luke's relief came out in one simple word, breathed more than spoken. Good. The sun dipped below the ridge, and in that fragile moment, Lena Hartwell realized the truth. She had not come for a husband. She had come for a family. Morning crept slow and cold across Willow Ridge, the kind of dawn that made the cabin walls shiver. Lena Hartwell rose before the children stirred, her breath showing in the frigid air. She fed the fire with the few sticks of wood left in the box, praying the flames would take. The baby fussed in his crate, his small fists struggling against the worn quilt. Lena scooped him into her arms, rocking gently until his cries softened into tiny hiccups. Luke came in from outside, carrying a bundle of sticks so small it barely filled his arms. His cheeks were red from the cold, and frost clung to his hair. "That's all I could find," he said, embarrassed. "You did well," Lena said. "Every bit helps." He straightened, pride flickering in his eyes. That small spark warmed her more than the fire. When the others woke, they drifted to the table with hungry faces. Mercy, the girl with the wooden spoon, seated the younger boys around a cracked bowl, though nothing was inside it yet. "What do you usually eat?" Lena asked. Mercy hesitated. "Breakfast depends on what we didn't eat the night before." Lena looked at the bare shelves, the empty sacks, the dusty jars. It was clear the answer was very little. From her trunk, she pulled the last of her flour. Not much, but enough for biscuits. She set the bowl on the table and rolled up her sleeves. Law groups gathered around her, watching her every move. Ezra helped her crush the herbs. Mercy measured water with careful hands. Jonas held the spoon proudly, stirring with intense focus. The dough was uneven, lumpy in places, but it was theirs, made by hands that barely knew warmth yesterday. When the biscuits browned over the fire, filling the room with a smell far richer than they'd known in months, the children leaned forward, as if the scent alone might feed them. Lena divided the biscuits carefully, giving the biggest pieces to the smallest children. She took none for herself. Luke noticed. He slid half of his biscuit across the table. "You're eating," he said. "You need strength, same as us." Her throat tightened. She accepted, breaking off a small piece and chewing slowly. After breakfast, Lena stepped outside to gather her thoughts. The land stretched wide, frost glinting across the grass. The wind carried the faint metallic smell of cold earth. She pulled her shawl tight. "What now?" she whispered to the horizon. As if answering, a thin column of smoke rose from beyond the ridge, not from their chimney. Her stomach tightened. Luke followed her gaze. "That's not ours," he said quietly. "Does anyone live out that way?" Lena asked. He shook his head. "Not for miles." The column of smoke curled dark and heavy, not like cooking fire, more like someone watching, more like a warning. Lena swallowed hard. "Stay close today," she told him. Inside, she set the children to chores. Mercy tended the fire. Ezra gathered what little wood he could. Lena boiled the last scraps of pork into broth, stretching it with potatoes until it became a stew, thin but warm. Yet even as she worked, her eyes kept sliding toward the ridge. That evening, the children huddled around the hearth as Lena stirred the pot again, coaxing as much flavor as she could. The youngest two fell asleep on her lap. Ezra sat near the door, his small shoulders squared, guarding the house with nothing but a boy's courage. Lena touched his hair gently. "You don't need to keep watch." He stiffened. "Someone has to." She didn't argue. He had seen too much loss to trust the quiet. After the children lay in their beds, Lena opened a scrap of paper and wrote by firelight. Her hands shook as she formed the words. If I fall, let the world know I came empty-handed and still made a home for them. Let them know these children are not alone. She folded the note and tucked it beneath a loose board under the hearth. Night deepened. The cabin settled. The wind rattled the walls. Lena lay down on the floor near the baby's crate, still fully dressed. She didn't trust the dark enough to close her eyes. Hours passed. Sometime after midnight, a faint thud sounded outside, soft but unmistakable. Lena sat upright, heart pounding. Another thud. Boots. Someone walking near the barn. She rose quietly, gripping the iron poker beside the hearth. Ezra stirred, his eyes opening instantly as if he had been waiting for danger. "You heard it too," he whispered. She nodded. Together they stepped onto the porch. The night was cold, the grass silver with frost. The moon shone bright, revealing the barn doors swaying slightly. Someone had been there, but no one remained. Only a set of footprints leading away toward the ridge. Lena swallowed, lifting the broken latch from the barn door. It dangled in her hand like a warning. "They came close," she whispered. Ezra's fists clenched. "They'll come again." Lena looked toward the silent ridge, her resolve settling like stone. "Let them," she said quietly. "This family won't be taken." She stepped back inside, bolting the door, her heart pounding but steady. She had arrived, believing she was stepping into a marriage. Instead, she had stepped into a battle she intended to win. The next morning rose sharp and bitter, cold enough to sting the skin. Frost coated the windows, and the ground outside looked like someone had spread a thin veil of white dust over the earth. Lena woke with a jolt, the iron poker still clutched in her hand. The baby stirred in his crate, whimpering softly. She gathered him close, breathing him in as if he were the anchor keeping her steady. Ezra was already outside, chopping wood. Each swing of the axe was fierce, determined, as though he could cut fear itself in half. The younger boy stacked the pieces with clumsy eagerness. Mercy tied back her braids and stirred the leftover broth, stretching it with water even though it was already thin. Lena stepped outside. "Ezra," she called gently. He stopped mid-swing. "I'm getting us ready." "I know," she said, her voice soft. "But you don't have to hold the whole world on your shoulders." Ezra wiped his nose with his sleeve and looked away. "Pa used to say that, but he ain't here now. You are." The words struck deep. She placed a hand on his arm. "We'll stand together, not you alone." He nodded once, sharp and proud, though his eyes glistened. They worked through the cold morning, fixing the broken latch on the barn and tying scraps of quilt over the window cracks. Lena checked every door twice. Something in her bones told her the danger was not far off. By noon, the children were inside, warming themselves when a shadow moved near the fence line. Lena froze. Ezra followed her gaze. A tall man on horseback approached slowly, his figure dark against the pale sky. Lena's heart lurched. Was it the one who had left the footprints? Was it someone coming to take the children? She stepped onto the porch, her hand trembling but steady. The man raised his hand in greeting. "Ma'am," he called, voice rough from travel. "Name's Thomas Hale. I came about Samuel Carver." Lena stiffened. "He's gone." "I know," the man said, removing his hat respectfully. He had kind eyes, but tired ones, eyes that had seen miles of difficult road. "I'm his brother." Ezra sucked in a sharp breath. "Pa never talked about you." Thomas nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." He dismounted, unstrapping a small satchel from his saddle. "I came because of this," he said, handing the satchel to Lena. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small leather-bound book, a ledger. Lena opened the letter first. Samuel's handwriting shook across the page. "If she arrives, let her stay. Let her raise them if she chooses. She will be all they have left, and they will be all she needs. Tell her she was chosen because she has kindness enough to fill every empty space in this house." Lena's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. Ezra read over her shoulder, his jaw trembling. "He knew you'd come," the boy whispered. Lena pressed the letter to her heart. "Yes," she said softly, "he did." Thomas Hale watched them quietly. "I can stay a day or two," he said, "help with repairs. But I cannot stay longer. I have a homestead of my own to tend." Lena nodded. She was grateful for his honesty, for his presence, brief though it might be. The children warmed to him as he fixed the roof, mended the fence, and told quiet stories about the brother he once knew. But the ridge still weighed heavy on Lena's mind. When Thomas prepared to leave 2 mornings later, he pulled Lena aside. "Samuel owed money," he said quietly. "Men may come collecting. They're not the patient sort." Quote. Lena's stomach tightened. "I figured as much." Thomas nodded. "Be careful and keep your doors barred. You're stronger than you look, Miss Hartwell, but strength draws attention." With that, he rode off, leaving nothing behind but pale hoofprints fading into dust. For several days, peace returned. The children played near the creek. Lena planted seeds in the old tin pots. For a moment, life felt almost normal. But peace never lasted on the frontier. One chilly evening, as Lena stirred supper over the fire, a sharp knock rattled the door. Ezra sprang up. "I'll get it." Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, stand back." She opened the door slowly. 2 men stood outside, the same ones she had feared. Hard faces, cold eyes. One held a folded paper with a red seal. "Ma'am," the tall one growled, "we've come for what's owed." Lena stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "What do you want?" she asked. "The land, the house, the young ones. Samuel owed more than he could pay, and since he's gone, the debt falls on what he left behind." Quote. "Not one child leaves this house," Lena said, voice steady but trembling underneath. The shorter man snorted. "You think you can stop us? A slip of a woman?" Lena stared at them, her heart pounding with a fierce protectiveness she had never known. "I am their mother by choice. That's worth more than any paper you carry." The tall man reached forward, grabbing her arm. Before she could react, a loud click echoed across the yard. Gideon Talmadge, the neighbor who had quietly watched them for weeks, stood from behind the barn. Shotgun ready, face hard. "Let her go," he said, voice level. The men froze. Behind Lena, the door swung open. Ezra stepped onto the porch with the rusted rifle clutched in his hands. Mercy stood beside him, holding the baby tight against her chest. Neighbors began appearing, one by one. Mrs. Avery, old Clem, the blacksmith. More than she expected, more than she realized cared. "This family stays," Mrs. Avery said firmly. "You'll not take one of them." The 2 men looked around. The numbers were against them. "This isn't over," the tall one snapped. But they mounted their horses and rode off, their threats fading into the wind. Lena's knees finally buckled. She sank to the ground. Ezra ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You didn't let them take us," he whispered. Lena pulled him close, tears spilling into his hair. "I never will." That night, after the children slept safely under patched quilts, Lena added a final line to Samuel's ledger. "Today, I became their mother, not by blood, not by law, by love. And love will keep this house standing." Outside, the wind moved gently through the grass. Not as a threat, but like a hymn, carrying their hope across the wide frontier.